Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for delighted you're able to join us for our webinar to introduce the Scotland Loves Local Fund number 2, which we're delighted to formally launch earlier on this week and to give you a bit of a detailed briefing on it today. Delighted with a really encouraging turnout, well over 130 with us already and still coming in, so that's a really encouraging indication of the amount of interest and support for the fund already. So I'm delighted you're all able to join us. A bit about the format for the session. I should say that the chat box is open, so if you have any questions or observations, feel free to use the chat box on your Zoom app to make those contributions. After we've heard from our guests, we'll have a bit of a Q&A to deal with any significant points that have been raised in the chat box. If there are any, if not, we'll come back to you individually. But hopefully I think everything should be relatively self-explanatory. Could we just move on to the next slide, Alison? So you'll see that we're delighted to be welcomed today by the Community Wealth Minister, Tom Arthur, MSP. Delighted that you're able to join us, Minister, having launched the fund on Monday in a rather rainy Milngavie, but we're delighted to have you join us and introduce the fund formally. And after the Minister has spoken, we're joined by Phil Prentice, the Chief Officer of Scotland's Towns Partnership, who are administering the fund, to give an indication on its aims and ambitions, the application timelines and so on. And then after Phil's contribution, we'll have a bit of a Q&A, so we'll deal with any questions that you've posed in the chat box. If there are any obvious ones, we'll perhaps deal with directly with you on a one-to-one basis, but if there are any specifically interesting ones, we'll deal with that in that open Q&A. But I'm very delighted for you all to join us, and then we'll finish any time between 2:30 and 2:45 and 2:45, depending on the number of questions. So, delighted to welcome for this afternoon's session Tom Arthur, who's the Minister for Community Wealth, in addition to public finance and a long list of other responsibilities. Minister, I'm delighted you're able to be with us earlier on the week in Milngavie and also to join us this afternoon. The floor is yours. Over to you.
Thanks, Peter, and good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me to speak at the Scotland Loves Local Fund webinar. Well, this is a virtual event. I was, as you mentioned, pleased to launch the fund in person during a visit to our Druicket Milngavie earlier this week, from which I've just about dried out from now. Getting out to meet businesses and community leaders, listening to their concerns, and seeing how they have benefited from our previous funding was inspirational. It provided further insight into what our town centre communities need most and how best we can help. The needs of places across Scotland differ greatly, and that's why local decisions are so important, as are local discussions, and while I'll be engaging as much as possible as we continue recovery from the pandemic. The Scotland Loves Local Fund is part of our broader £10 million programme commitment to deliver the Scotland Loves Local programme, aimed at building on the great community spirit we witnessed during the pandemic and encouraging people to choose and love local. I want this fund to support a wide range of projects that help address the biggest issues we face: tackling disadvantage and poverty, climate change, revitalising our town centres and neighbourhoods, and supporting our businesses and communities in the recovery. Projects that help bring about behavioural change so that more people are living well locally, choosing to visit local shops and businesses as the norm, supporting a circular economy, and crucially, doing less online shopping through the big multinationals. All leading to more diverse local economies, creating jobs and opportunities for our people, and a greener and more inclusive recovery for our places. The fund is complementary to our other investment in communities, including the £325 million place-based investment programme announced earlier this year, which will run over a similar timeframe. The programme will be used to help tackle inequalities and support inclusive economic development in disadvantaged and fragile remote communities across Scotland. It will aim to ensure that all place-based investments are shaped by the needs and aspirations of local communities and accelerate our ambitions for place, 20-minute neighbourhoods, town centre action, community-led regeneration and community wealth building. It will build on the successful impact of the Regeneration Capital Grant Fund and Town Centre Action Plan. The Scotland Loves Local Fund can help shape longer-term plans for our places and inform investment through this programme. The Government's manifesto commits us to taking forward our ambitions for 20-minute neighbourhoods. We expect that the Loves Local Fund will help communities to deliver on some good ideas to enable their community to retain and develop facilities and services which local people can access within a short walk from home. 20-minute neighbourhoods are an important part of our drive for net zero, as well as to support social inclusion and well-being. A tremendous joint effort with businesses, communities, national and local government, and the third and public sectors working together has helped keep businesses afloat and our most vulnerable protected during the pandemic. The Scotland Loves Local Fund from 2020 was fully subscribed and supported over 215 projects Scotland-wide. A great showcase of government, businesses and communities working positively together. Over the last 16 months, we have witnessed the positivity built around the Loves Local brand. The marketing campaign has been a constant source of encouragement. It is now in its fourth phase, Choose Local, encouraging everyone to think local first and safely support businesses in their communities. The loyalty card schemes will encourage spend and kickstart sales growth in our local economies. Businesses can get on board now through lovelocal.scot, and I would recommend those who have not yet done so to sign up. I also recently launched the Scotland Loves Local Awards, which aim to recognise those who have gone the extra mile to help the recovery effort. And I'm delighted to have now launched this new multi-year fund with up to £2 million of funding available to commence projects in the current financial year. The fund will provide 50% match funding for projects between £10,000 and £50,000. The match funding will ensure more robust and wider partnerships, meaning investment is going where it is needed most. We are inviting collaborative proposals from local partnerships on what is needed to improve their town, village or neighbourhood. This could be funding for small-scale improvements or adaptations, climate or active travel programmes, home delivery digital systems, pop-up shops and markets, or direct funding or expansion of Scotland Loves Local loyalty card schemes. We hope the fund will bring new creative projects, footfall and activity into our towns and neighbourhoods, helping build wealth and resilience in local communities and supporting local partnerships and enterprises. It reinforces our determination to support all of Scotland's communities to recover from the pandemic, and will help strengthen the vital support being provided through the marketing campaign and loyalty card schemes. So I'm pleased to announce the opening of this second Scotland Loves Local Fund, and I'm looking forward to seeing your projects help with our recovery efforts. This fund will be administered on our behalf by Scotland's Town Partnership, so I will now hand back to Peter, who will provide more details on how to apply.
Thank you, Minister. That's really great high-level summary of the fund, and delighted that it's been so successful already, and hopefully we'll all look forward to some really great applications coming in that will make a difference all over Scotland. I should have said the Minister has some other parliamentary business to take care of, so we'll be quietly dropping out during the remainder of the session. But Minister, can I take this opportunity for thanking you for taking the time to join us, and we look forward to seeing those great projects come forward. Phil Prentice is Chief Officer of Scotland's Towns Partnership, and Phil, you're going to take us through some of the more operational details, perhaps some thoughts on the kind of projects that we saw that were successful last time that we'd like to see more of. Already some questions coming in on the type, combination bids or organisations with more than one town centre. Perhaps we can address some of that in your response. But Phil, delighted to welcome you to give us an outline of the working of the fund. Over to you.
Thanks, Minister. Thanks, Peter, and good afternoon, everybody. Yep, I can concur with what Minister said. Milngavie was a typical Scottish summer day, where we had a wee bit of sunshine, and then the rest of it was a bit of biblical rain. So it's fantastic that we've actually got to this point in time where we've got a multi-year fund to help with our wider economic recovery. So if you don't mind, I'm going to try and share a few slides just to create a wee bit of context. You're all getting that okay?
Yes, we can see it, Phil.
Fantastic.
All good, Phil.
Okay. So in terms of the broader context, whenever we looked at what was happening with COVID-19 and how people's behaviours had shifted, we reckoned quite a lot of that was going to be consolidated behaviour, i.e. people were going to be staying in their towns much more, that probably longer term things like work patterns, educational patterns, employment patterns, everything was going to change, but that was probably for the good. So people were reconnecting with their neighbourhoods, with their communities, with their green space, with their high streets. And in the term of climate, which is net zero and the climate emergency, which is going to be the next big challenge facing all of us, that was actually a positive step forward, and we needed to start thinking about how can we consolidate this? How can we build more resilience into our local economies, more security into food, more security into supply chain? And I think the pandemic actually gave us a head start to do that, which will put us in better shape for tackling climate emergency. So pretty shortly into the pandemic, we came up with this Love Local brand. And to be fair, it has been really well received right across the country, the length and breadth of Scotland. People are now buying into this and actually starting to understand the rationale behind it. It's a no-brainer. Basically, it's people in those communities investing in their own communities, which in turn reduces carbon footprint, is much more sustainable. You're keeping your neighbours in jobs. And why wouldn't you do that, as opposed to just sending your money off to Panama via Amazon, etc.? So it's very much a story of sustainability and localism. It was great to actually be out and about again on Monday in Milngavie. That's the 5 minutes or so when it was sunny. And it was also quite interesting to be able to put on a suit for the first time in about 2 years, albeit I wasn't able to button it. It was nice just to be able to leave it loosely opened. But it was really, really good just to be able to see and hear from the businesses on the ground how appreciative they'd been with all the support programs government had implemented, local authorities, communities all coming together. So hearing that firsthand from the business community was fantastic. So Love Local is now a programme for government commitment. Nicola Sturgeon, pre-election, has said this will be a programme for government delivery, which has really expanded the whole ambition of what started off as a small sort of Scotland's Towns Partnership stroke Scottish Government initiative. It's much bigger now. And just to remind you, this was the launch of the actual fund, but there are other components now to this programme. We have, as already mentioned, the Town and City gift card platform. We're in the process now of trying to onboard as many local authorities as possible, and then as many businesses within local authorities as possible. Just to give you a brief description of this, this builds on the localism concept. Each of the 32 local authorities will be given a provision of Love Local cards. Those cards can only be redeemed within your locality. The smartness around this system is it's GPS tagged. So if you live in Argyll and Bute and you get an Argyll and Bute gift card, you will only be able to use that in Argyll and Bute. So that's a strong message for political leadership to say, this is a good investment. None of this will leak out to online platforms. None of this will leak out to Glasgow or Edinburgh. We can actually retain this within our locality. And we know that every penny we invest in this actually goes into our local economy and our local businesses. So it's a very strong message. I did mention about online giants, and the Minister also did. One of the benefits of this tech platform that we've developed is it's closed loop. So you cannot redeem this card on Amazon, Boohoo, ASOS, any of these big international online giants. The only places that this can be redeemed is in businesses in Scotland with a physical or digital footprint in the country, and then the hyper local level within your local authority area. So as I say, over the summer, we'll be onboarding as many local authorities as possible. We'll be working with Federation of Small Business, Scottish Chambers of Commerce, Business Gateway, Development Trust Association, because social enterprises are also included. We want to try and get everybody onboarded so they're ready in the autumn to take this card, which then locks in a multiplier effect to our local economies. The fund, which has already been mentioned, I think it's really important that Scottish Government have now taken a much longer term view of what needs to be done in our town and city centres, and also in rural Scotland, because the rural towns are equally as important. So the fact that we can now take a longer view and know that money is going to be available over the lifetime of the Parliament is really a big, big step forward. And that was one of the key recommendations that came out of a New Future for Scotland's Towns review that was undertaken during the pandemic. So the Scottish Government have already delivered on that recommendation. Not only is there the £325 million place-based investment programme, but there's also now the Scotland Loves Local Fund. So again, you can use the revenue element of the Love Local Fund to support some of the bigger capital investments in the place-based investment programme. This year, we're going to be running a national awards programme, again, recognising those businesses, communities, heroes who have basically went the extra mile through the pandemic to try and help with a greener, fairer recovery. And again, it's been really heartening just to see the numbers of people who have been put forward by their local communities. People have recognised that folk have really stepped up to the plate and helped beyond that extra mile whenever they were needed most. So again, it's just a celebration of positivity. And I have to say, this has been a bright light through dark times. The whole Love Local campaign has been embraced by the Scottish population to an extraordinary level. It's been really, really heartening just to see the number of people, the businesses, organisations that have adopted this and really taken it to heart. I'm just going to flag up again the card. We really do need support from everybody to try and get as many businesses onboarded as possible. It's a very simple process, but businesses are very busy. But it's really just a question of going onto the Love Local website, clicking the link, and just following through 1 minute's worth of instructions to actually get that business enabled. Social enterprises, KICs, SKIOs, your local retail, your hospitality sector, everybody. This is not just a gift card for gift shops. This is basically local currency that can be spent in grocery stores, in hairdressers, and hospitality. Albeit it's called a gift card, it's basically currency that can be used in any single business outlet in Scotland, as long as you can accept MasterCard technology. And I think 99.9% of businesses can. So please spread the message and tell your local business community to sign up. And then whenever these cards are loaded, people will then be able to benefit from that expenditure through autumn and winter. And it will give the country a significant economic boost and help us recover more quickly from the pandemic. The other angle to the Love Local programme, so we've looked at the fact that there's a fund, we've looked at the fact that there's awards, and there's also the Town and City gift card platform. But the thing that underpins all of that's the campaign. And for those of you who have the misfortune of watching Emmerdale Farm or Coronation Street, you will see that we've been putting on primetime adverts around this. We began in summer of last year. This was basically a message to say we are reopening again. This was before the second lockdown. So we were working very closely behind the scenes. The First Scotland Loves Local Fund done a lot of good work in terms of PPE and a lot of physical infrastructure investments to make the town centre safer. So we had sneeze screens and lots of protective investment to try and get the environment right for people to be confident enough to come back in physically into their town centre. So we ran a series of TV adverts on Scottish television and Borders TV. We done a lot of national press. We done a big social media campaign. And to be honest, that paid off. Over 3.5 million of Scotland's citizens actually seen those adverts more than once. And a lot something like 1.5 million, seen them half a dozen times. But the proof in the pudding was people actually did start to go back into their town centres, and that was a massive boost for the local businesses within those town centres. And there's probably a relief for a lot of citizens who had been able to get their hair cut for the first time in about a year. So this was the first message. Our places are safe. Scotland's reopening again. Treat people with respect. Treat people with kindness. Everybody's anxious. Everybody's still a wee bit unsure. But we've created a safe environment, and you need to reward these people who have been actually working hard behind the scenes to keep everything afloat during the pandemic. You know, these are the retailers that fed you and made sure that everything was still held together. Now go back and reward them. If you do not do that, you might end up losing them. We then moved into the second phase of the campaign, which was in the autumn time. Again, just reminding people about the localism and how the multiplier and the economic benefit and the environmental benefit could be achieved. So this advert actually followed a journey of the pound around Gourock on the west coast of Scotland. And it was sort of saying, look, the milkman up in the hill is now pivoted. Instead of delivering to hospitality, he's now delivering locally. He's taken on a couple of extra drivers. He's got a green fleet delivery vehicle. He's bringing stuff down into the local grocery store and the folk in Gourock. That means the grocery store is able to employ somebody. He goes next door to get his haircut. The hairdresser and the person goes across to have a cup of coffee. It was showing the rotation of local multiplier effect and expenditure in a local town. So basically that pound flipped about 6 times. And that's a key message with all of the stuff we're trying to achieve here. If you invest in your local economy, the money that goes into that business owner's till pays someone, pays a local supplier. The whole thing just has that embedded multiplier effect and resilience. It's building resilience into the local economy as well. Again, for those of you who have the misfortune of watching Emmerdale Farm, this is the current run of adverts, which is shoulder to shoulder, choose local, you know, the barista, the barber, the baker. You know, we're trying to just get people's behavior to shift on a permanent basis. Our town centres, these are it's the heart of our community. This isn't about bricks and mortar, it's about people. It's about your culture, it's about your heritage. You must engage with your local economy more. Yes, it's easier and more convenient just to flick online, but that's an extractive economic model that doesn't do very many people good. The 1% up at the top benefit, the rest of us disbenefit from that. Go in and support your local businesses safely. So that's the current run of ads, which is phase 4 of the campaign. And we're hopeful that we can potentially run a phase 5 as we lead up towards Christmas and the launch of the gift cards, etc. The key aim of the fund is to build wealth of local communities. That's the underpinning programme for government commitment. So it is about localism, it's about sustainability, it's about net zero. The application forms, guidance and details of how the applications will be assessed. We've tried to keep this as simple as possible. We've listened to feedback from people across the country, from our partners in local government, from development trusts and community groups. And the message we're hearing loud and clear is there's a multiplicity of funds. And sometimes the funding application and the process is quite convoluted and complex. So please keep this as simple as possible. And that's what we've endeavoured to do. So you can find out more about the guidance and the application process online, but I can tell you that we've kept it as simple and as straightforward as possible. And we will aim to try and turn that around as per the deadlines that we've published, which will be closing date 1st of October. The following week, we'll hopefully get the assessment of those applications and then awards, decisions and grants out to people as quickly as possible. So that's really the end of my formal presentation. So I'll hand back to Peter now, who can curate. We'll take a few questions, but by and large, I would recommend people actually go to the website, look at the guidance, because it is very comprehensive. You know, each step of the application form, we've worked, you know, we've told you exactly how to fill that out. The guidance tells you what type of projects we're after, whether it's revenue or capital-based projects, and also importantly, the eligibility of organisations. I think the underpin, it will be the typical organisations that we would fund. So community groups, development trusts, business improvement districts, local authorities, chambers of commerce, you know, that type of organisation. But the key message behind this is collaboration. And this is one of the key learnings from the pandemic. Where local towns set aside their local politics, their fiefdoms and so on, and the personalities, and they work much more collaboratively together, that's the towns that actually benefited more. We just seen that cohesive approach where everybody played to their own strengths. We knew who needed help. We knew who could give the help. That type of approach is much better than everybody way off working in their own wee silos. We don't want that. We want to see a comprehensive, collaborative approach. So think big, think ambitious. This is about a greener, fairer recovery. And we welcome your applications coming in as soon as possible. But we still have a few minutes, I believe, for questions. So I'll stop sharing my screen just now.
We do, Phil, have a few minutes, and thank you very much for that. I'll maybe just ask Alison just to post in the chat box. There's a link to the Scotland's Towns page, which has the application criteria and the application forms. We'll just post that in the chat. But Phil, maybe, I mean, there's quite a few questions come in, and I hasten to add, if we don't reply to any directly, then we'll do so in an email to you after the event. And furthermore, I should also say that there'll be a recording available of the event on the Scotland's Towns website. Thank you, Alison. That's posted on the chat now. Is a link to that page where you'll see the deadlines for completion and the fund opened earlier on the day. But the closing date, I think I'm right in saying, is the 1st of October. So just to deal with some of this which have come in, Phil, just general observation about people asking, about the number of organisations in each community. Do they all have to get together? Or on the other side of things, can one organisation apply for work across a number of communities? Any sort of quick outline response on that?
Yeah, I'm easy. We would prefer to have less applications coming in. So if you can consolidate an approach and have a multiple application, one person applying on behalf of multiple organizations, that's the most sensible way of doing it. So you do need to have that conversation with the groups to agree on a single organization applying. I would expect, for example, local authorities to basically embrace this. Particularly, this is a good opportunity to use this fund to expand the Town and City gift card program. That could be a significant element of money to load onto the card to get it expanded and up and running more quickly. But local authorities, for example, could, in dialogue with the key partners in the area, put in a single application on behalf of multiple organisations and multiple interventions. Would be quite happy to consider those.
And I think you mentioned in reply to Tracy that match funding doesn't have to be financial, it can be support in kind as well.
Yeah, again, the guidance will go through that in a wee bit more detail, but the same terms and conditions around match funding from the last programme will apply, maybe even a wee bit more flexibility in terms of, you can use property costs, staff costs, in kind. So we're really we're not looking the match funding element to be a barrier, but we do want to get people working more collaboratively. And I think bringing that match funding element to the party actually ensures that there's more buy-in locally, but it also doubles the investment in the programme. So a £10 million programme automatically becomes a £20 million programme, and it just gets more people working together, more people engaged.
Thanks, Phil. Phil Evans asking, can you apply for part funding if the total project is over £50,000? Well,
I think the answer to that is potentially yes. I mean, if it meets the key aims of the and the criteria of the programme and eligibility is fine, there's nothing to stop people actually applying for a chunk of fund now to deliver a first phase of a programme and then applying for the next phase next year. This is a multi-year rolling programme, and that, again, this is one of the key benefits that has maybe been understated. This will run the lifetime of this Parliament. So if you've got more complex projects that you see running over 2 to 3 years, you should be able to put in an application now and then a further application next year to continue that on a longer basis. So potentially, I would need to see the detail of the actual application to advise on that. But we will be there in the background. Alison at Scotland's Towns and myself, we'll be helping with a helpline, with answering emails, etc., and being able to pick up the phone and talk to people in more detail about that.
And a question on this is specifically a gift card, but I think it is worth just mentioning, Angela C. asking what the gift card implications for companies that are based out of one local authority area but run venues in other nearby local authority areas. I think the answer is you can register to accept the card in any local authority area in which
Yes.
you're accepting payments.
Yes, you can. I mean,
So-
the card's going to be available at every local authority. So even though if you're based in one particular authority, but you've got venues, etc., in multiple authorities, the key message is just get all of your venues and organizations onboarded. That's the same for big national retailers. It's the same for transport providers. Just get all of them, you know, the likes of Boots in Scotland, they've already got their point of sales lit up for this to accept it. So, you know, don't be thinking about local authority boundaries. Think of Scotland as a whole, because this is going to be a global card. And other partner organisations like Visit Scotland, Historic Environment Scotland, they're doing exactly the same thing as well.
And having seen it done, I can vouch for the fact that it is literally a 60-second operation to sign up. So it's not a great barrier to get there. Mentioned that community groups and local organisations will be favoured. Is the fund available to businesses? From Jonathan Blaird.
Potentially. It really depends on what the ambition and outcome of the fund would be. It's not a direct fund to private enterprise. It is more about collaboration. But if a business, for example, was coming forward saying, we have got agreement with local business groups and community groups and local authority to do X, Y, Z for the benefit of everybody, then we would consider that. It really just depends on the detail of what's trying to be delivered.
Great. Well, I think we've dealt with the thrust of most of the contributions. So again, just reiterating that if there are any questions that have been posted that we haven't dealt with, we will come back to you directly by email afterwards. And also, if you were to click on the fund page on the Scotland's Towns website, you'll see a contact details there for Alison, who's ready, willing and able to respond to any direct inquiries you might have. So if you've got specific ideas you want to run past her, then feel free to take up that opportunity direct. But I think the message is get your thinking caps on. This is a really exciting fund, as Phil and the Minister have said. The fact that it's multi-year brings a whole new opportunity to communities across Scotland. I think it's welcome indication that this is not just a one-off, but something that's going to be ongoing, and that's really encouraging. So get your thinking caps on. Be mindful of the timeline, which, as I say, runs through until a closing date on the 1st of October. But please do circulate around your networks and get your bids in, so to speak. Phil, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate your support for the event, and also to the Minister, who's had to leave us, as I mentioned, for another engagement. But thank you to you all for joining us. I think we've finished ahead of time, which is 10 minutes ahead of time, which gives you ample time to get the giggle on all over Scotland. Appreciate your time. Thanks very much for joining us. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.